This little video series is called Dying Dar's Way, Radically Real Spiels on the End of Life. I'm here today with my friend Joanne, and our subject today is, well, in New Jersey it's called medical aid in dying. Most people know this as physician-assisted suicide, and we now have this option in the state of New Jersey. I'd like to preface everything that we have to say today by saying that we are both very practiced. We're both in counseling. We're both very practiced at I statements. Some of the things we're going to talk about are really hot button issues, and we want people to know that we are not telling you and making any suggestions. We're just here to talk about the option in the state of New Jersey now for medical aid in dying. So I guess just in practical terms, Joanne, it's a 15-day process.
Correct. From
the time that you make an oral agreement with physicians that they will usher you through the process. It takes 2. Now, this is relatively new in New Jersey. By the way, thank you for doing this with me. This ain't easy. Is it easy to find physicians who will cooperate with the process?
Well, it wasn't for us. I mean, we talked about it sort of in the last year with our family practice physician who, while on the one hand supportive of Richard not going on beyond when he really wanted to.
In a sort of a theoretical way?
Right.
Okay.
He would not write the prescription.
Right.
And then while we were still talking about it and the whole healthcare system he was attached to decided not to participate.
Right.
So he would act as the second, in that we'd already talked to him about it, and then got another doctor to agree to write the prescription and proceed with us in that way. So we have both the qualifications we needed and the timing of it. My husband had ALS, and he was in his almost 6th year. The end of his 5th year of having that, and he had decided he was at the end, because he decided fairly early on what the end would be for him. And
yeah, let's talk about that for a minute. I want you to know that I am not scared of cancer. Cancer as a diagnosis just has not been bad for me, but ALS is now and always has been my worst, scariest nightmare disease, because it holds hostage a lively mind in a body that can no longer communicate. Can you just say a few words about what it was like living with Richard as he deteriorated with ALS?
Well, he lost his ability to speak very quickly in the first year after he was diagnosed, which was just shocking. It was backwards. He had what was called a bulbar presentation, so he did lose those abilities right off the bat. But he could still walk for quite a while and used walking sticks to help him, and he could use his hands. And he was a musician, and to him, that was the absolute bottom line. He had to be able to continue to play music,
and that defined a life worth living for him,
correct.
Right?
That's correct.
So, and he could, what was his instrument?
He played the piano, the guitar, and the violin, and anything else. I mean, he could play a lot of instruments.
Any instrument he could get his hands on.
And so he had a very loyal group of friends who would continue to play with him, even as his abilities got less and less. Like he could play notes instead of chords, or, towards the end, or even just pluck in there. That counted to him until he couldn't do that.
I totally get this. This is something we each get to define for ourselves. What gives us a sense of meaning and purpose, or if meaning and purpose aren't the reason that we'd want to live. We each get to decide what it is that defines I'm not ready to go versus I am ready to go. Talk more about the process. Like, I know that it requires a compounding pharmacist, but can you tell us, most towns don't have a compounding pharmacist, right? What does that mean?
Well, it means that there's got to be a pharmacy where they will actually make the drugs in the pharmacy, in which case it's not a chain, it's not one of the big ones. And we lived on the edge of 2 counties, and even though we have a compounding pharmacy in the town that I live in, they were not willing to make something like that, but the hospice organization we were working with knew of another one, and I made the contact with the person who was willing to
Right.
make the medication.
It's so new in the state of New Jersey. I'm sure this is still evolving. Okay, so let's bring in a few more pieces. There's certain requirements on the part of the patient. If you were demented or couldn't...
We were told he had to be, he was far, far from demented, but he had to be able to physically administer the drugs himself. And it was in a 3-part piece, so that he had to do the first step, and he was on a feeding tube, so it involved inserting the drugs into his feeding tube, and then he had to wait a half an hour and do the next step, and then he had to wait another half an hour before he did the final step. And that was a little fraught for me, because there's a point at which you can't change your mind,
right?
Because you've already gone too far, and that was after the first step, basically. So we checked with him and said, are you sure now, because this is it.
Right, no turning around now.
He was not, he did not lose any resolve. He remained capable, even though he was sedated, of doing all 3 steps himself, and seemed totally ready to go. It was just, this is what I've decided to do. This is what I'm doing.
I totally get it.
Thank you all for being here, but I'm going.
Right.
Yeah.
I totally get that. Is it just like one cocktail, or are there options about how the recipes, the cocktails?
Actually, each part of it had to be mixed. So there were, it wasn't just all put together in one. It was 3 separate parts.
Okay.
And there are, apparently, the doctor has the ability to make up the combination of things that it would require to end his life herself or himself. So it's not just like one formula that everyone uses.
Okay.
It could be different.
Okay. And I know from many discussions with my own hospice workers that they don't touch this.
That's correct.
I totally get why hospice workers will not touch this, but they're the ones that have to pronounce the someone is dead. So there's got to be some involvement from the hospice. How did they show up for you?
Well, we've been quite attached. We've grown quite attached to our hospice nurse, and he chose a time, and we had probably a few days notice. Although none of us felt, and when I'm saying none of us, my son and daughter, and their spouses, felt particularly certain that he would in fact do it on the day that he said he was going to do it, at the time he said he was going to do it. And so he notified her what his intention was, and given that it was a weekend, he felt, well, she'll show up or she won't. Somebody will when he needs to be pronounced. But she did come, and she did stay until the end and beyond. And she did pronounce him. And I have to say I don't have a really great memory of any of that after that.
Well, it becomes a blur. I'm sure it
Yeah.
becomes a blur. It's a highly charged time emotionally with family to...
Yeah, it was just the most profound experience for all of us. To watch him leave like that.
Right. And decide. It takes courage.
Yeah,
It
you're
takes
not kidding.
It takes a lot of courage.
It really did.
I'm thinking about it. I'm still sitting up straight, but at this point, it takes a lot of effort just for me to sit up straight. So, but I'm thinking about it because my tumor sits right on my airway, and if I have the option of slowly suffocating and losing brain function over a prolonged period of time, or making this option, I would be very grateful that I live in the state of New Jersey where this is an option.
It was a huge relief to us that was possible.
Well, how long had he been, in bed mostly, needing help to get in and out of bed, and just, his basic...
Probably been most of that year. He died in October. Most of that year we had overnight help, and he needed help getting out of bed and help in the bathroom and things like that.
Wow. All right. Well, I think we'll leave the rest of the details to the information link, which I will put in the program notes. So, describe Richard's desires once he found out that this had become an option. I knew it was on the radar screen because of Oregon, and it was part of the family discussion, but it wasn't an option here? Had he discussed other exit strategies, or?
He had. We thought about going to Oregon. We have a son who lives there. We thought, well, that's a possibility.
Right.
But that became less appealing as it became more and more difficult for him to do any kind of movement. Even though he traveled quite a bit in the years before he got to that point. He had a feeding tube, as I said, and then he decided that if the law didn't change so that he could get the prescription, he would just stop eating.
Right.
And that would take longer. I mean, right up until the last 2 weeks, so really, he still considered that as a possibility.
Right.
But it wasn't very palatable to him, pardon the pun, to go that way. It just seemed like it was going to take too long, and he'd get weaker, and he'd be able to do less. He'd rather just get it over with.
Right. I totally understand. Speaking with candor and putting the issues out there so that people can see some real people who are grappling with these decisions, it's a real service. And I know it takes a lot for you to come here and do this with me. And I think I'm speaking for our viewers, over 10,000 now.
Really?
Thank you very much.
Wow.
That somebody must be interested in these issues, because
I hope
we're getting very positive
we get more
feedback.
and more interested in it. It's really important, I think.
So I would like to make one of those really personal I statements, because, again, it's such a hot button issue. But one of the things that I'm researching now includes articles on healthcare rationing. And then you see that phrase coming up, killing grandma.
Yeah.
I so strongly believe, the I statements here, so strongly believe that we need a safe forum in which we can have these discussions, rational discussions about these options. I'm thrilled to be living in the state of New Jersey now and have it safe, even if, hospice can't touch it, and most of the doctors aren't touching it yet, and it's hard to find a pharmacy. At least it's possible. And one of the big motivators for me personally is my environmental conscience. I really don't want to stick around endlessly using up resources. I have such a connection to nature and my role as an organism whose time has come, is ready to be returned to the soil. And I feel great beauty in that, because I don't want to be using up a whole lot of resources. If I had the ability to reassign some of the money that would have gone into a very small chance of a longer survival, for me, if I could take that and put it in perinatal care or public health initiatives, I would totally do that. That's not an option, but that's what I wish for. Mm-hmm. Is that environmental conscience thing. How about for you yourself? Is there any motivating factor for you in terms of how long you would like your life extended? Or
I feel strongly as you do that I don't want to waste resources at the end of my life. I don't want to spend a bunch of money trying to save something that ultimately isn't going to give me much more.
That teeny little tail of possibility on the bell curve.
Right. All of it involving intense medical care that I've had some experience with is not pleasant. Not the way I want to live. It's not a life worth living. And I feel really strongly about maintaining for myself a life that's worth living, and when that's gone, then that's gone. It's time to go. Mm-hmm.
I so closely resonate with that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's just time to go.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Time to go.